Welcome back, Red Spotters, to the Sugar and the Red Spotlight Entertainment Podcast. I'm your host today, Alexis J. Soto, joined by my very good friend, Ms. Alexis Moreno, and we're back with our recap segment series of The Crown, which is currently streaming on Netflix. In the last two installments, the last two episodes, we went over seasons 1 and 2, and of course, here we are today, going over season 3, and it's as if we start off every single Crown recap by saying a lot of shit went down, a lot of things happened, as is the nature of the show. So yeah, thank you all for tuning in, and hopefully you enjoy this episode where we basically just act as if we're spilling tea. Because that pretty much is the show at this point. Alexis, how are you doing today? And tell me how you feel about how the last two episodes have gone, and how excited you are for today's episode.
Hello. I've been good. Just got over a cold, so that was fun. This has been fun. I love this show, and I like talking about it, and I'm just happy that you're excited about it too.
Yeah. Is it? I think one of the things that, we've been able to do with our television segment episodes in the past year is to really, get an opportunity to explore a lot of shit we don't normally talk about, like basically all of the TV shows that we've covered, unless they're connected to like Marvel or Star Wars, and even then, like it would be on like only rare occasions we wouldn't talk about them at all.
Yeah.
And so like I'm very, I don't know, just appreciative of all the different kinds of shows, like the variety, especially with The Crown. It's just not one that we would normally mention all that much, but it's also, I feel, like what you just said, it's invigorating being able to not just like talk about how much you love something, but to also have somebody opposite you and feel, not only understand that excitement, but like feel it, and and is a fan of the show as well, to kind of like yeah, it just feels good to have somebody to talk to that like loves a show the same way you do, and we can have like a nice back and forth on it. All of us, have shows that we like that can't necessarily find that other person to talk to, even amongst our own group.
Yeah.
We don't all have the same interests. We all have vastly different.
Like right now, I
interests.
just finished Bridgerton on Netflix in like a day. And I'm 100% sure none of you guys are going to watch it.
I've heard people talk about how like popular it is, but like I don't really know what it's about.
It's basically like Gossip Girl in like the Victorian era.
Okay.
But like picture it like on HBO. Like
okay.
Yeah. It's pretty fun.
It's doing well. I know one that's being talked about a lot that I don't even know what it's about, but maybe you might, is The Queen's Gambit. People keep talking about that. What is that?
I've only seen the first episode. I haven't finished the rest. But that first episode was so good. It's basically this girl, and she is like a chess like master, and it's like her story, but like she's an orphan, and like, kind of like, at least the first episode is like the process of her kind of understanding chess and loving chess. But also like she has like addiction problems, and like, yeah, like it's crazy. But that one's really good.
Yeah. I don't know. I'm just like, I'm very happy that I get to share this with you, because quite often it's very, I think rare for where we have like, unless we're doing a special occasion episode, like for us to like do a sit down just one-on-one with each other. We usually have Kyle or David or Peter third wheeling for other occasions and everything, right? But kind of like with David, like a lot of the things that we bonded over, like The Good Place or Shield, and now WandaVision, it just feels good, you know, especially this one-on-one setting. I really do appreciate that. And we get to have, I think, a more fluid conversation. That way it's like,
yeah,
not one person or, you know, the other saying everything and then the other people on the panel don't have as much to say.
Yeah.
But yeah. And as far as The Crown is concerned, one thing that I want to celebrate, you know, I feel that because both you and I have a mutual disdain for a particular television show that is, you know, beloved by everybody but us. It seems it's hilarious to me that according to some of the third-party analytics firms that do, you know, research and see how content, you know, across movies and television perform on streaming, it was hilarious to me to find that The Crown kicked The Mandalorian's ass in the rankings.
As it should.
So, as it should. Yeah, it was, I don't know, something just felt so right about that. Like, thank you. Thank you. And of course, notice how the media didn't react to it. I wonder why. If it doesn't fit the narrative, right? We'll not acknowledge it. I wonder how often that it happens every day with literally everything. Yeah, but no. So we're talking about season 3 today, and I have a bunch of shit I want to go over, and I do want to toss it over to you just to get like initial feelings from what you remember, right? Because, you know, we have to also acknowledge that, you know, we have been planning this series for weeks, if not months at this point, and sometimes memory can be a hard thing to piece the details together. That's why, you know, I've gone back and re-reviewed the stuff that we viewed, because we watched so much content, we watched so much media, as you're seeing right now on the Red Spotlight feed, how many different like series we're doing at the same time. It's hard to keep that all in your head at the same time. And so I wanted to go back and revisit at least the summary notes and everything about the season. I'm going to detail the big things that happened in a minute, but I want to go to you, Alexis, first, and just without talking about any of the story or the plot points, what you liked about this season, or if you liked this season, really.
So I did have to go back and review as well, because I feel like this was the least memorable season for me. But going back, like, I still loved it. Like, reviewing everything that happened. There's a lot of dark moments in this season. But there's also a lot of, like, real things that happen, like, with the characters, and, like, you know, each of them kind of go through their own existential crisis type of thing. Which I appreciate, because I feel it makes them more human. And you kind of see, even though it's very sad, I feel like you also kind of feel like, oh, okay, like, you know, like they're actual people. Like, they're not always backstabbing bitches.
Yeah, and honestly, that's kind of why I feel like this is my favorite season. And again, I haven't like actually like sat down and like thought it through about like which is my favorites, but like, I mean, I love all of 4 seasons. Yeah. It's a great show. Let's be real here. But, you know, when I was doing a review of what happened in this season, I actually didn't realize that many of my favorite episodes of the show were in this season. Like, a lot of episodes. And this season is interesting. It's a little bit of a divergence. This season, I mean, not this show, there are overarching storylines that I feel that happen pretty clearly in seasons 1, 2, and 4. There are also, like, you know, every now and then you'll get like a insular episodic story that's like, you know, closed off and by itself in the middle of a season. But with season 3, like, it's really episodic for the most part. Like, it's not, there are reoccurring and overarching themes.
Yeah, but not like actual like stories or like long stories.
Right.
Yeah.
Not like as if, so it'll be this is actually going to really contrast in a big way from how we reviewed season 2, where we basically discussed where the storylines started and going on from there. Here, we don't have that, but we have, I think you were trying to say, really smaller, intimate moments to really examine who these people are. And that's always kind of my favorite stuff in anything. And so some of the stuff that I picked up on here, Elizabeth trying to find emotion. I mean, she's been trying to do that the entire show, but this season is kind of like her big thing. She does. She does. Philip's midlife crisis.
That's like one of the best episodes, I feel like.
Yeah. And it doesn't just, it's not just a one episode, because it also, there's a lot. I mean, with Elizabeth, you know, there was a wonderful, there's a moment in the season where she is having glimpses of a life she could have had away. It's one of the first times we see her away for a long time from Buckingham Palace. With Philip, you also have a really nice payoff with what happened with the last season with, you know, his backstory. His mom, Princess, I believe Alice, comes back in a big way. Of course, finally, we get to know Charles as a character and as a person, and he and Camilla give the royal family a lot of heartache, it seemed, and vice versa. Margaret, I always feel so bad for her. She has her ups and downs, as every season seems to be. Uncle Dickie tried to do a real coup, not the, you know, the bitch ass one that we saw in America a couple of weeks ago. This is how a real coup is done if it were to happen. And ultimately, there are just these really wonderful themes of aging. The first episode of the season is actually called Olding, which is a great way to introduce, which is kind of the elephant in the room, right, of this season. Yeah. We have a new cast, and they're older.
Whole new cast.
We have a brand new cast. Yeah, older cast. But yeah, in short, I feel like this was the season where, like, it wasn't just that I loved watching the show. Oh no, I love this show. This was the season for me where it did it. All right. So let's get into this little synopsis that I have here to kind of ground us into the era that we'll be discussing. So season 3 covers the time period between 1964, which is where we left off with season 2, and 1977. Beginning with Harold Wilson's election as Prime Minister and ending with the Silver Jubilee of Elizabeth II. Events depicted include the unmasking of the Queen's art advisor, Sir Anthony Blunt, as a Soviet spy, Harold Wilson and Edward Heath's respective terms as Prime Minister, the Aberfan disaster, the Apollo 11 moon landing, the 1969 investiture of Prince Charles, the death of the Duke of Windsor, the death and state funeral of Winston Churchill, and Princess Margaret's affair with Roddy Llewellyn and her suicide attempt that leads to divorce from Tony Armstrong-Jones. I should have probably said spoiler alert, but hey, I mean, if you're listening, you're listening to watch it by now if you're in season 3. I would assume so. Yes. So all those things happened and more, which, you know, we'll get into. And let me just do a quick recap here of the large cast, a new cast that we have here, and then we can get into where we want to start. So Olivia Colman steps in as Queen Elizabeth, Tobias Menzies as Prince Philip, Helena Bonham Carter as Princess Margaret, Ben Daniels as Tony Armstrong-Jones, Jason Watkins as Prime Minister Harold Wilson, Marion Bailey as the Queen Mother, Aaron Doherty as Princess Anne, Jane Lapater as Princess Alice, Charles Dance as Louis Mountbatten or Uncle Dickie, Josh O'Connor as Prince Charles, Emerald Fennell as Camilla Shand, Derek Jacobi as the Duke of Windsor, Gerald Chaplin as Wallace, his wife, John Lithgow, featuring John Lithgow as Winston Churchill, Clancy Brown as President Johnson, David Rintoul as Sir Michael Edeen, and Charles Edward as Sir Martin Charteris. Those last two characters were basically the Queen's press people, for the most part. Large cast. Mm-hmm. And I guess, like, if there's an appropriate way to start off season 3 is the pressure, the anxiety for the casting department to not fuck it up, because recasting is tricky in the best of circumstances. And this, I think, would be in the best of circumstances where, like, there's a lot of goodwill extended. I mean, it makes sense why we're recasting. I mean, we're getting into these characters in later years. They can't look the same. You know, we have to see them grow and age. So it could have very well easily have killed the show if they did not absolutely kill it with this casting, you know? And there could have also been scenarios where, you know, as we've seen with the writing, you know, fairly consistent throughout the seasons, but if you don't like the new Elizabeth, you don't like the new Philip, you're going to be like, ugh, I don't like you. The other person was so much better. Mm-hmm. So you have to understand, like, especially if you go into this, like, already, you know, loving Claire Foy and Matt Smith and, you know, Vanessa Kirby and so many wonderful people. I don't know if there has ever been a better example of perfect casting or perfect recasting than this.
They're all so good. And the transition seems so, like, seamless, and you completely believe everything that's happening.
One of the first things Olivia Colman says as Queen Elizabeth in her first scene, and it's smart for them to address it immediately at the top, in case people were confused why Claire Foy is no longer around. They address it with, you know, the Queen Elizabeth looking at two images as her younger self and as her older self, the younger self being Claire Foy, the older self being Olivia Colman. They address her as the sovereign, so everybody gets with the picture, okay, this is an older queen, we've recasted, we're moving on from there. And, you know, as the queen does, she says, all right, so let's get on with it. Let's get on with it, shall we?
And I love Olivia Colman. Oh my god. After The Crown, or at least this season, I saw, and I don't think it was this, when she got her Oscar. Not her Oscar,
Well, she got an Oscar.
Oh, okay. Then it was...
She won the Oscar for The Favorite.
It was for that movie, but it wasn't the Oscar. It was one of the other awards. And she went up there to, like, give her speech. I love her. Oh my god. She's so funny. And I think she said that she was, like, drunk, and she truly didn't think that she was gonna win it. So she had absolutely nothing prepared, and she was just kind of winging it. I love her.
Yeah. And I don't know if she was already doing The Crown at that point. We're talking about, what, 2018?
I think so.
Right? 2017? It's all a blur, to be honest. No, I think it might have been 2018 when all that happened. It's hard to remember the years, really. No, look. It's actually kind of, in a way, unsettling how these actors so seamlessly step into these roles. You just buy it.
Mm-hmm.
And again, we shouldn't like diminish how difficult it is to replace an actor with somebody else, and it's the same character. There are many examples where that's failed completely.
Yeah.
And there are very few examples where that's, succeeded, beyond just, oh, they're fine or they're good. And it's not as if and you don't get the sense that any of the actors here are trying to do impressions of like Matt Smith or Claire Foy. They're doing their own take on it. And yet it still feels like the same person, almost kind of like hauntingly. When I look at Tobias Menzies, who is amazing as Philip, I feel like I'm looking at an older Matt Smith. It's honestly
weird.
Spooky.
Yeah.
It's spooky how they've been able to cast these older versions. Helena Bonham Carter as Margaret. Wow.
I know. I think that one was the one that surprised me the most, because you're so used to seeing her in these weird roles. I mean, she will always be Mrs. Lovitz to me, or Bellatrix, and then to see her here, it was just oh my god. And I also I think I said it in the previous episode, I didn't know that there was gonna be a recasting. And when I saw her, I was like, oh my god, wait, what's happening? I love this.
Oh, wait, you need to tell that story, because that's what I was watching this already understanding, of course, that they had recast because they were getting older. And so I knew what was coming. You didn't.
I didn't.
Tell me what happened. I really want to hear your confusion at all.
Well, yeah. Well, when you talked about the first scene where she's looking at herself, I was like, wait, is this her? What's happening? And I had to stop it and Google it and stuff, and I was like, oh, okay.
I would have low-key been a little bit crushed, because I was looking forward to seeing more of Claire Foy and Matt Smith and everybody else, and oh, I guess they're gone.
Yeah, no, I mean, I was, because they were amazing, but then as the episode went on, I was like, oh my god, they're really good, and I still love this.
Yeah. And I'm sure with anyone, this may have been our experiences, but at least with those big three, they really were seamless. With some others, it depends on, it's a give and take on whether or not you believe it until, you give it a couple of episodes. But by the end, you're just with it, And we should mention, since we talked about Helena Bonham Carter, you're right, unlike anything that she usually does. Yeah. And I don't mean to lump her in with Tim Burton's career, but she's been in a lot of Tim Burton stuff, and married, she does a lot of. They were, yeah. So, and I'm also happy because, and for this season, I do believe it is for this season, she won a Screen Actors Guild Award.
Well deserved. For
her performance. Yeah, for Best Supporting Actress, I believe. Well deserved. And it was another reminder of, the star power that The Crown. Remember, I believe John Lithgow in the past as Winston Churchill, and Claire Foy, if I'm not mistaken, for either, I think it was for season 2.
I think so.
That she did win. Mm-hmm. Yeah, she did win. So, hey, there's a lot of great powerhouse performances on this show, and very happy for Helena Bonham Carter in particular, because she's not somebody who I feel is talked about all that often or appreciated by the industry. Yeah. So good for her.
And especially to do television as well.
Yeah. When you're used to doing film,
at least that I know of. I don't think she's ever done television. I could be wrong though. But
different world, right? Television is just a lot more regarded than it used to be, and it seems to be, especially now since movies are kind of extinct, right? At least the movie theaters are. So I got a question then, just out of curiosity, before we dip into the stories. Were there any of the recasting choices that you were a little iffy on and that took you a while, or were there some that you just never really caught on to what actors there were previously?
No. They make it so easy, I feel, for you to understand. Like, this is how it is now.
Yeah. No, yeah. I think the only actor that we see here that's not recast is John Lithgow.
Yeah.
Which is perfectly understandable. He was already, 80 when... How much different are you going to look at?
Yeah.
You're going to look at 90 from when you're at 80. So, like, okay. Yeah. But maybe it's appropriate also to mention, like, just like the first episode in a lot of ways, not just from that first sequence that we mentioned, but it very much feels like a turning point for the show, for the series. You know, it's not, of course, just that there's a new cast alongside you, but several times throughout not just the first episode, but then also the season, there's talk of the characters getting older and having to come to face with it. And maybe like the moments where, or the moment I would say, in the first episode that really signaled, you know, the end of an era and the beginning of a new one was, you know, the death of Winston.
Yeah.
It was a big moment. And also, you do feel a little bit for Elizabeth because, you know, while she is sad, of course, about losing her friend, it just is... I mean, if I were in her shoes, I would be feeling a lot of emotions, not just, you know, sadness over losing someone that was so important to you and influential to what you do as a career, but then also just another reminder of how much time has passed and it may not have
how much
felt
time,
like a long
how much
time,
time
but
is
now,
left.
Yeah. And it felt that way too. And it seemed as if it was interesting to see John Lithgow back in that first episode, and I had a feeling that this might have been the episode where we're going to lose him because he just, I think, had another stroke or something.
Yeah.
And yeah, it is the end of an era on the show, and one that brings forth also a new era for politics in Great Britain, because I think it's the first time since we've been following the show that the Labour Party has won the majority of the seats in Parliament. The Labour Party, which is, I believe it is the Labour Party, right? That's what they're called. I want to say that's what they are. That they're led by Harold Wilson. They're the leftists. Yeah. They're basically the liberals. That never held any power whatsoever with the previous, you know, prime ministers, Macmillan, Eden, and Churchill.
Yeah.
And were you going to say something?
No.
I was going to say, Wilson's an interesting character. I really liked him. I think the actor that they had, Jason Watkins, was really good. Really personable. He seemed very unusual for the position he held. You can definitely feel various times that this person was, I don't want to say he was unqualified. That's unfair. But he was not used to being in charge, or at least, you know, the people that subscribe to his ideology, their party is just not used to power, as Winston, I think, remarked when, you know, the change happened. And it's also a little hilarious and sad how, you know, because immediately as he's elected, there are these rumors going around that he's a Russian spy.
Yeah.
and you know the reason why. And the Crown, I don't think, makes it very subtle. And yet, a lot of people in established, you know, power circles don't want to say it openly into the public. But this only ever seems to happen when you have leftists assume any kind of power. This only ever seems to happen when it's people who are not like in the established order, who are not subscribing to neoliberal or conservative like think tanks. Only ever when you have people who, God forbid, they fight for the rights of labor, right? Only ever those are the people that are only ever questioned.
Yeah.
And even the Queen, was convinced that this person was a spy because of like how unusual this person. There wasn't anything unusual about him. He was probably a little awkward and uncomfortable, like having to have this thrown to him. Probably wasn't expecting to win and everything, but he wasn't a bad person. And I hope that people watching this understood perfectly, like, this is exactly how Bernie Sanders was treated and still is treated, you know, by the mainstream media and the power circles. I mean, we talk about this show is inherent in politics, so forgive me if I'm going to go on a rant here, but just this past week, America had an inauguration, and one of the high-ranking Democratic officials was bragging on national television that George W. Bush, a former Republican president, went up and thanked him for nominating Joe Biden and stopping Bernie Sanders from becoming the Democratic nominee. They just do it out in the open. Bill Clinton, at a high-profile funeral deep into the election cycle, weirdly and strangely thanked the same Democratic individual for bringing the family together. That was his interpretation of blocking Sanders from being the nominee. You saw how in Great Britain, with Jeremy Corbyn, though, to be fair, with Britain, there are a lot of complexities like Brexit, which is the stupidest thing probably ever. But, you know, Corbyn, who was a leftist, was framed as an anti-Semite. Interestingly enough, there were people who were trying to paint Bernie as an anti-Semite, but Bernie's Jewish. So that didn't necessarily land all that well here. So I know. Yeah, so I just bring this up, you know, as another example to educate people on the differences between how a certain group of people are treated and how the others are not at all that way. But
it's okay. Maybe, you know, we still have AOC. Maybe.
If she doesn't quit.
Or
kill herself.
Oh my god.
With all the, you know, the crap going on. But, yeah, I mean, it's also fascinating, right? From a political standpoint, like, I think they do a relatively good job of informing you about the conditions to what led to these changes. And since we're on this, I find it hilariously enough that toward the end of the season, we get a random new prime minister who is such a unlikable stiff that he can't even be bothered to smile. I think he had like one or two scenes, or maybe one episode, but he was such a jackass, like in every sense of the word. Like, and it's a perfect allegory for the same cycle of mistakes that people all around the world keep on making. And so you replace a left-wing administration with a right-wing administration, and you're shocked he doesn't care about the rights of workers. Because I think at that point he was not at all taking seriously the strikes that were happening, you know, the unfair treatment of the electrical workers and everything. So, like, and what happens? He loses his job, and then Wilson comes back, and it's like, I get tired of seeing the same mistakes being made in different eras of time, you know?
And, like, not even us, like, all over the world, like...
Right.
It's like how, I don't know. There was this video I saw the other day, that somebody was kind of, shitting on, what's her name? McCain.
Cindy McCain?
No. The one that hosts from The View?
Oh, Meghan McCain.
How she made a comment on, what's it called? Maternity leave, like when you're pregnant and, like, you know, obviously you can't be at work because you're fucking pregnant, and how that they should be getting paid and, like, all this stuff, right? And when before she was pregnant, she was, like, against it, or, like, not really, like, in a whole agreement with it. And so people were like, dude, like, we can't keep waiting on you people to experience these things in order to speak out about it or speak out against it and try to make a difference. Like, why can't you have empathy for these people? Like, if we are telling you, it's because it's happening. It's not for any other reason. I just don't understand, like, why you have to go through these things in order to do something about it.
Yeah. What is really interesting in terms of like the political era of where the show ultimately ends, and I'm addressing the prime minister first because I mean, not really the most expansive stuff happens with him, but he has a good relationship with the queen, a lot better than what we're about to see in the next season, and we'll get to that when we get to the next season. But you know, he ends up barely winning Wilson at the end, and his party is barely holding any kind of power, and it's kind of almost split 50-50. And I find that really, you know, it's eerie how similar that is to where we are right now, because, you know, President Biden, you know, we should say President Biden has taken office now. He did win by 5 or 6 million votes, but in the Electoral College, it wasn't that big of a victory. And then also in the Senate, they're literally split 50-50 with, you know, 1 vote to spare. So it's like, what I find terrifying about that parallel is, of course, in the next season of The Crown, Wilson was gone and you got Margaret Thatcher. And if the leftists, well, I struggle calling them leftists, but if the centrists who claim to be leftists that are in power right now don't address
this issue,
all of the shitty situations, in 4 years from now, we could have our own Margaret Thatcher, and the answers are so obvious, right? The patterns in history are so clear. I don't understand how complicated this can be to decipher, and yet here they are. But for the show, I really did enjoy the relationship between Wilson and with Elizabeth. There was a growing fondness between those two. Even to the point where, you know, she gave him the honor of basically inviting herself, but I mean, the queen gets to invite herself wherever she wants to go, let's be real. But she invited herself to Downing Street to dine with him, which has only ever happened with Churchill. So I feel like she shows her hand a little bit in her favorite prime ministers by giving him that honor. So, and it's really interesting, those two.
Yeah.
In this season, especially, you know, you do get to see that relationship a little bit tested, although, because with Aberfan, with the mining disaster that happened, which we'll get to, but in particular to Wilson, you know, you kept trying to convince her, we kind of need you to come here, I think. And then she was like, I don't know if it's proper or not. So like, there was, you know, interesting back and forths between both of them, you know? So, but I think this is, if we're going to talk about the prime minister elements of this season, much better this year than last year. I would say, because Anthony Eden was barely around, and then Macmillan was a wet blanket, and he left. So there you go. But it was hilarious watching that Heath asshole, you know, blow in the wind. So there goes into the prime minister. Do you have? I'm getting the sense that perhaps one of the better ways to approach this recap. I don't want to go episode by episode. I don't want to touch on every single episode, but there are a numerous amount of episodes that we do want to mention and start with. And since I mentioned it, should we just go ahead and start off with Aberfan, which, you know, details the mining disaster that happened?
Yeah.
Because holy shit.
That was
holy
one
shit.
of the most shocking things that I saw. I remember I watched this episode with David, And I was like yelling. I was like, no, what the fuck? What is happening? And it starts off like, like something like in a happy mood. I don't know. And then like the more it goes on, you're just like, wait, holy shit. And I was like, no, like this didn't happen. I was in denial that this actually happened. And obviously I Googled it and I was like, dude, what the fuck? It was crazy.
Something should have tipped us off when the episode opened with a different locale filled with people that we've never seen before. Plainly ordinary in every sense of the word. And then it kept going and it kept going and it kept going. And then at some point, there is this sense of dread.
Yeah.
This ominous sound almost. Not that I don't think the music is doing anything ominous. Not that I recall, but there's an ominous feeling that all of a sudden in your brain, something like a bulb goes off and you begin to wonder, wait. Oh no. Oh God. Wait. Are we about to see something pretty awful here? Like, and we did, and it was worse than what I imagined it would be. It was actually a lot worse than what I thought it would be, because we don't usually see anything so horrific in this sense on this show. Yeah. Really. So if it's not at all clear, because again, and probably it caught you and I off by surprise, because this is apparently a historical event, but not one that you and I were aware of, and perhaps with good reason. Right, yeah. Well, I mean, America has a shitty job in general, but also it didn't happen here, so yeah. It probably wouldn't be on anybody's curriculum in America. I would expect that this would be something that would be much more in the curriculum with Great Britain, the UK and everything. So it came as a complete shock, a complete surprise. It's just a horrible, horrible accident in which, I need to, give me 1 second, okay? I need to make sure I talk about this in the most accurate way possible, because it would be disrespectful not to. But can you talk about Alexis, just how long it took you to process what you just saw? Because basically what we see, and just, I don't want to be too graphic here, but we see one of the more graphic scenes, maybe not in the whole show, but maybe one of the more harrowing moments I've ever seen on the screen, where a classroom as ordinary as the ones where I would teach in or I would sub in, as ordinary as all of you listening remember any day going, to class on an elementary school day, and then the world literally falls on top of you. I mean, it not only is shocking, but it just watching it happen made my heart hurt. Oh yeah, really, really bad.
I mean, me and David, we watched this whole thing, and I had to like pause it and just kind of process what I was watching, and the more I looked it up, the worse it got. Like.
It kept getting worse.
It kept getting worse and worse. And I feel like, stuff like this happens, but to actually see it happening, and I don't know, I guess like also just the fact that it's a classroom and these kids are like kindergartners. Like, oh my God. And like before the episode, or before the accident, they show all of the kids like waking up, like being with their families, getting walked to school. And it's like, it's a small town, so like everybody knows each other. And this thing, and like, you know, after it happens, it's like the whole town is just like grieving together because it's such a small place. You know, everybody got affected in one way or the other. Like, it's nuts, crazy.
In moments like these, whether, you know, and let's be real, I think perhaps more than anything else, the show really committed to actual events. And because you have to, otherwise you would be disrespectful to really, you know, to the families that suffered. Yeah. So the Aberfan disaster was the catastrophic collapse of a colliery spoil tip on the 21st of October in 1966. Think of, and for those of you who have not seen this, just imagine yourself basically a small town, a very small village in the Welsh country, and they live next to this huge mountain where I believe it's an oil refinery of some sort, but they're getting a natural resource out of it. And then a horrible accident happens in which the whole thing collapses, and I don't know how much of the town was. It literally looks
like lava, like coming down.
Oh my God. It looks like the end of the world. It looks like Pompeii.
Yeah.
Basically. And it destroyed basically the entire school. And oh my God, it's just gut-wrenching to think about. You know, I think it says here that a period of heavy rain led to build up water within the tip, which caused it to suddenly slide downhill as a slurry, killing 116 children and 28 adults as it engulfed Pantglass Junior School and other buildings.
Oh my God.
So already it's a departure from much of the series in terms of how real this felt, how close to home it hit, even though, of course, we weren't around when that happened, but you just can't help but relate and feel for the people because, I mean, most people are compassionate and they have empathy, and so automatically any disaster you feel bad about, it's worse when children are involved, though.
Yeah.
It's a lot worse when you see, especially since in the beginning of the episode, you don't realize it in those early moments, but you're watching the final moments of these children's lives. It's hard to talk about, and especially afterward when you see it, and we were saying how it gets more tragic as it gets going because these people are digging for days and days and days,
trying to find their bodies, like,
and already knowing they're probably
they're
dead already.
The families that are digging, like, it's not like workers or anything. It's the families that are out there digging, looking for their kids.
Gosh, it is, and perhaps I think the gravity of this situation. And they use this character to great effect to really sell it home because he perhaps is one of the most unsympathetic characters in the whole show. Margaret's husband, Tony. We've talked about him before. But they use him to great effect as somebody like him who you don't normally or usually get to see care or get emotional like that. But to see him go... Mm-hmm. And then when Margaret visits Elizabeth and talks about how she was moved to tears by Tony, and then Tony saying to her, and again, this is at the point where their marriage is very much not at all in a good place, but he says to her, you know, go to the kids, give them a kiss on the head for me. Just how moving it is. And right, and it's not just Tony. We see repeatedly throughout the entire episode how members of the royal family, who we sometimes forget can be real people, are moved. Like real people are, in a way that we never get to see them like that, rarely, especially much less in a public setting as this. Mm-hmm. For example, Philip. Ugh. Philip is sent to, oh God, harrowing moment when you have basically a memorial, or basically a memorial, and the whole, I think they have flowers in the shape of a cross, I believe, and these people are just singing with so much pain in their hearts that I think so we mentioned earlier that Elizabeth, at several points, and perhaps most of all in this episode, does question her lack of, I guess, being able to cry, and confuses that with not, with being too cold and not caring enough, which is a common critique of hers. But perhaps I don't think we've seen her, grasp with it in such a way before, where it's actually affecting her and bothering her that she can be as cold. This is the first time she actually feels like, well, maybe I should be a little bit more emotive. Why can't I be a little bit more emotive? And I don't think it's said explicitly, but I can't help but feel that after a long time on the crown, that kind of happens to you, especially with what you were basically instructed how to reign as you were. But it even moves her. We see her finally go, after not going immediately, but we actually finally see her go and visit this place and the families, and she had to fake a tear because she still couldn't cry at that point, which, that's a really sad moment, because I feel like at least what's explicitly being said there is just how harmful the crown has been to her as a person. Because I don't think it used to be that hard for her to cry.
Yeah.
But I'm just going to assume that's what the point of it. And then, of course, at the end, though, I do believe she does cry, right?
Somebody recorded the memorial, and she heard all of the family singing, and she just broke down.
Yeah.
That was a really hard episode to watch.
Yeah. I mean, it was great.
Yeah.
But yeah, and maybe the most infuriating part of it is, and again, I said previously that we had dispensed with the politics, but no, they very much matter here, and they very much pissed me off too, because this happens every single time. This keeps happening, and then the assholes who are responsible for this mess continue to deflect for political expediency. So at this point in time, as we've mentioned with Wilson, the Labour Party is in charge. They are the administration. And yes, it is perfectly reasonable to critique any administration while a tragic accident happens for any of the mishaps that happened. Absolutely. But I think it is said several times over, I believe in this episode, that the infrastructure that collapsed was because the previous administrations had neglected to upkeep them. And who were the previous administrations? Oh, they were all Conservative Party. All of them did not address the concerns, and I feel are largely responsible for what happened in this situation. Had those facilities have been updated, these people wouldn't have died. And what do? How do they respond? Oh, they blame Harold Wilson. Oh, they blame the Labour Party. I wonder what that sounds like now. I wonder what you'll see people like that
we'll be seeing that
in America now.
A few months.
Yeah, we'll be seeing it now. But it just goes to, it shows you the point. We just, in America, in our own country, we just left behind a conservative presidency that handed us 400,000 deaths because they so incompetently managed a global pandemic. How wonderful it is for conservatives, right? Because, I mean, and this should be talked about more enough. The new administration came in. There was no plan for a vaccination distribution plan. Of course there wasn't. And there were a whole bunch. In the last couple of days, the Biden administration has signed many executive orders that sound like you just think they would have already happened because they're no does for safety protocols and precautions for mask mandates.
I didn't know the whole traveling thing was happen. I thought that was like no.
That shouldn't be happening. Like, he just signed an order that mandates for all airline workers to wear a mask. Like, what? How isn't that already law?
Oh, I forgot to tell you. This has nothing to do with what we're talking about. Well, with the crown. I don't know if you heard about. It was here in Arizona where this guy had, like, he was a store owner. And he had a sign saying no masks allowed. Okay. So this person goes in with a mask. They get in an argument because he was like, hey, no masks allowed. And the person was like, I'm gonna wear my fucking mask. And this guy pulls a gun on them. No masks allowed. Sorry.
No masks allowed. What happened to my freedom? I love how all of those bullshit arguments just fly out the window. And it never really was about the person that they think that it was. You know, I don't want to go on a tangent here, but I think the point is made very easily so. What kind of consistency the conservatives leave in their track, the wasteland they leave, only for others to clean up their fucking mess. And look what happens. They still have the audacity to say, oh, it's not our fault. Mm-hmm. When repeatedly, they're the cause for people straight up dying. So get the fuck out of here with that shit. This really did piss me off because, oh, of course this would happen. Because that's, of course, what they do every single time. Like right now, $2,000 checks? Maybe in a couple of months. Nah, that's too much. Okay, this got me more going than I thought it would. Anyway, that was a great episode. Do you have, one that you want to get to, or do you want to just go off any order? Because I have a couple of episodes that we go off. So one we can talk about is Bubbikins, which features Philip trying to do this really not trashy, but just like this boring ass documentary, you know, giving the press access. That's the B storyline, but the main thing is Princess Alice comes into full circle here. You know, she comes and lives at the Royal Palace. Mm-hmm.
That was a really good episode too. I think Philip's storyline in this season I thought was the most interesting.
Yeah.
And I liked out of all 4 seasons. But yeah, that was another episode where I was like, wait, I had like no idea about this or like who this person is, and she is, I don't know, this person went through so much.
I mean, talk about trauma. Mm-hmm. Princess Alice is a very interesting character. I mean, she's a royal, but she's not really.
Yeah.
You know, she's never, and also the horrors that she was exposed to. I think at the end of it, it's just a wonderful way to explore the tough past yet again that Philip had, and you know, I don't even know what to say, man. Like I just, the best way to say it is in how that reporter, you know, wrote that article about her. Like, she is the rare royal where not only has she suffered like us, but more than the rest of us. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
She was basically...
You mentioned the reporter, and yeah. I feel like this whole episode is kind of through his eyes, but like we're him, where he was very much interested in the family and kind of trying to make a scandal with them or try to find something with them. And then he goes and he actually ends up running into Alice. And he was just like so intrigued by her, as I feel we all were.
Well, I mean, she's dressed like a nun, and she basically was that in Greece for most, if not all, her adult life. And I do want to say that we did see her briefly in the first episode of the series back in season 1. I remember the Queen Mother and Queen Mary, like, were offended by how that she was dressed like a nun at the wedding. I think.
Oh, I don't remember this.
It was like one moment. She had like no lines, but she was there.
Because of course they would.
Of course they would do that. But it's just another example of tragedy and the horrors that the royal family can do. I mean, this Princess Alice was institutionalized and locked up in a loony bin, and she did nothing wrong. She had no real illness, from what I understand. Right?
Yeah. I have to... Let me see. Because I know I looked her up, but there was, like... I'm sorry, this person went through so much.
No, they went through a lot. But I think what was also just a little bit inspiring about her attitude is just how, like, nonchalant she can be, and how approachable and how nice and kind she was to anyone, really. Mm-hmm. And I love how... You know, she almost the first week she moves into this royal palace, and the reporter asks her for an interview, and she's like, "Oh, sure, let's do it." Like, no big deal. I love her whole thing. I really do. And, you know, throughout the episode, you see Philip try so hard to get this documentary made, and so the public would have a better, because I think he's fighting for more funding, or I think there was a threat of, you know, the state cutting their funding or whatever. And yeah, great, like a documentary that shows that they're fucking rich people that live in castles was the perfect idea for how to make sure that they can get a raise. I'm shocked that idea backfired. But, you know, you see how distant he's become with his mom, and in some ways, while, you know, he's trying to do this documentary, he's a little, classist, a little bit in a way, right? Like, he doesn't want her around because of how she's dressed and because of who she is, and it's just, it's not what he wants the image of the royal family to be. But when he realized that basically what he wanted, you know, came in the form of, you know, his mom basically delivering it on a silver platter with that interview. And then, of course, them all realizing what she really went through.
Yeah.
It was nice to see him have that moment with her and, you know, walk in the yard or in the garden or whatever it was, you know, to just acknowledge that and to have, you know, somewhat of a reconciliation there.
Yeah. There's this paragraph. This is basically kind of, you know, things that she did or went through. In 1930, she was diagnosed with schizophrenia and was committed to a sanatorium in Switzerland. Thereafter, she lived separately from her husband, and after her recovery, she devoted most of her remaining years to charity work in Greece. She stayed in Athens during the Second World War, sheltering Jewish refugees, for which she is recognized as righteous among the nations by Israel's Holocaust Memorial Institution. After the war, she stayed in Greece and founded the Greek Orthodox nursing order of nuns, known as the Christian Sisterhood of Martha and Mary.
What can you say?
Yep.
Really. It was a really good episode. And I also, I think it was the first time we saw, really, an adult Princess Anne. Mm-hmm. And, you know, throughout the episode, I think she's used by Philip to do what he wants with the documentary. And I don't know. I don't think it's explicitly stated, but what I do like is how she is so clearly his favorite, and how kind of alike they are in a little bit.
Yeah.
But yeah, really good episode. And then from there, shall we talk about... I think I want to save the Margaret stuff for the end.
Yeah.
Because there's a lot of stuff that happens to her. So shall we do the coup? First of all, I have to say, man, I love Charles Dance. He's an amazing actor in anything. And of course, he was fantastic on Game of Thrones.
Yeah.
As, not Tyra, is it? No, Lannister. Sorry, I was
Tywin?
Lannister. Tywin Lannister, that's correct. Tywin Lannister. And so wonderful to see him. And then he's, Lord Mountbatten, Uncle Dickie, and is older. And is seemingly recruited. And God, how many moments happen in this season again? Right? So Wilson, who is a leftist, right? Okay, what happens? Oh, let's cut the budget of the military defense just a little bit, okay? Just so we can, spread the wealth around into other places. So he fires Mountbatten because he was like, you're not going to cut the military. Okay, you're fired. And then what happens? Oh, the beautiful Banks go out and reach out to this beloved military leader. And they plan a coup to overthrow the government, to overthrow the prime minister, which at some point they decide to recruit the queen into doing that coup, which they calculate would be the only way to be successful. Again. This wouldn't have happened if this were a conservative prime minister. This just wouldn't have happened. But don't you just love, right? A leftist is in charge, and well, of course there would have been a legit coup attempt. Or even if it was premeditated, it was definitely there and well orchestrated. God. Jesus Christ. Anyway. On the other side of this episode, we have Elizabeth, who is off with Porchy, her longtime friend. And it's really interesting seeing her in other environments and seeing her basically, one of her few passions is horse breeding and horse racing. That's what she and Porchy have based their relationship and friendship off of. And as she's going to all these different places, learning about these new advancements made in this industry and the time that she's spending with Porchy, you do get a sense. And Olivia Colman is so great with, a lot of the acting in this is just seeing her face, her facial expressions.
And just how happy she is. You see her so happy.
Oh, she's happy. That's right. Yeah. You're being given a glimpse again of a life that you could have had, but can't have. And she's so into it. And I felt her, I don't know why, but I felt her pain. It, of course, her fantasy, her month-long fantasy, which was nice, just came crashing down. Oh, because Uncle Dickie is trying to do a coup. And I could, even though she didn't say it, her face was like, oh, fuck me. Now I have to go do this. Pissed. Yeah.
She's like, I'm gone for 5 minutes.
And so I think at that point when she got that call, she was in America, so she basically had to fly back to Buckingham Palace, and then because Wilson had been notified in advance, thankfully, that the coup was going to happen. And, Uncle Dickie walks in, him basically trying to sell her on treason, and her like, no, sit down. This is what's going to, sit down. And then gives him the whole like, what the fuck?
Mm-hmm.
What the fuck? It also wouldn't have been successful even if like she had no previous warning, and if she were around. She's not the person who would literally do that.
Yeah.
Especially with Wilson.
I think the part that kind of I was like, oh, okay, so you're like this person. When he got fired and he's leaving his office and all of the people are there and they look so angry that he's leaving, and like they're saying bye to him, but kind of being like, we're with you type of thing, like we agree with you. Crazy.
There are some institutions that need to be broken in this world. I'll just leave it at that. Because goddamn. And I didn't say a name about which institutions, but there were several in this episode, and I think that applies to a very good number of them. Anyway, there's that. We also have, since we're talking about Philip, let's do Moondust. That was sensational. Wow. Just wow. I mean, look, in general, I really loved the music this season. They did change composers. I have it right here. Martin Phipps. Love the music this season. I think it was the best scored of all of the seasons. But there was this wonderful piece that he wrote as we're watching images of the moon landing happen. It was, it's cliche to say, but it was literally out of this world, which is how great it sounded. And I don't know, it's a big Philip-centric episode. And again, as you know, with the reoccurring theme of this season, he's legit having a crisis, a midlife crisis here. Like, he is at a point where he's so obsessed with the moon landing. He's basically watching it all day and all night. We should recall, of course, that he was a pilot. Well, I don't know if he was a pilot, but he learned to fly. But he definitely was a Navyman as well. So it came off that he felt some sort of kinship with the astronauts, who are a different kind of pilots, obviously, blasting off into space. The first time this has ever happened and succeeded in happening by landing on the moon. And there was these really powerful images of these wonderful of Philip watching and just being glued
he looks like a
to the television
kid,
screen,
like watching this.
Yeah, just how mesmerized he is by it, you know? This is probably the closest I ever came to, like, understanding him.
Yeah, because at the same time, like, he's watching it and he's so excited and he's so, like, invested in this, but then, like, once it's over, he's like, fuck, like, I literally haven't done anything with my life except be the queen's husband. Which, he ain't wrong, but... So yeah, you could definitely relate to that. Obviously not in that sense, but just like watching people around you achieving their goals and you're just sitting there like, fuck, questioning every decision you've made or... Yeah.
And like with every other person, they have a midlife crisis. I think our generation, we're going to have several midlife crises.
I already had about 5.
yeah. And that's fair to say. But with him, yeah, he's definitely getting older. And I really did feel for him, though, about the inevitable disappointment that he had with meeting the astronauts. And like, he basically in his own imagination had propped them up to be, you know, these giant human beings.
Mm-hmm.
But they were just, you know, they were like us. We're just people. They're just young people in that. Like, you could definitely, and the tension in that meeting, just the generational difference alone, I think spoke volumes to how different these people were. And, you know, he had these wonderful questions planned, but
all they wanted to know is, how's Buckingham Palace?
Yeah, and after that, like, the disappointment, he just felt so empty. It's like, well, fuck, what do I do now? He just felt so defeated. And throughout the episode, I believe there is this, I think the new Archbishop, right?
Yeah.
He's a younger one. Yeah, because I think they also show in the beginning how, you know, he doesn't really care about religion the way that everybody else does. And he is a member of the Church of England. His wife is the head of the Church of England, as we've said. But they got somebody new and younger because the old person was like literally dying in front of them, at least killing them or boring them to sleep. But it was an interesting dynamic with those two characters, the younger one, the new younger Archbishop, and Philip. And you can definitely, I felt you could tell where this was going to go, but that whatever spiritual advisement he offered, and it wasn't always black and white, which I appreciated, but it was something that at the end is what, you know, Philip needed, because there are many people that feel exactly how he does, you know?
Yeah. It was a good episode. I like this one.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. All of these have been really good so far, you know? And then there are some I'm saving, okay? Just, I want to make sure that we're going to save Margaret for last, and then what I see here, all right. So the next one I have here is a Welsh name. Sirag Kremru. I butchered that, but it's Welsh apparently. But this is basically the introduction of Josh O'Connor as Prince Charles. Josh O'Connor, who is great, by the way, in anything. I haven't seen him in many projects, but he's such a good actor. And he's great as Charles, as a lot of the actors are here. But this is the first time, actually, I shouldn't say the first time. This is the first time with Josh O'Connor, but this is we saw an iteration of Charles in the last season. Got basically his own episode. But with here, and it's almost unfortunate that this is with, well, Camilla to the side. Let's put that bullshit to the side real quick. With this season, okay, because that can't really be put to the side in the next season because she's there, as we've seen. But I think that there are real clear differences with Charles in seasons 3 and 4 in terms of how we as an audience react to him. I don't think it's that far, I'm going that far out on a limb to say that with season 3 is concerned, at least I am much more sympathetic with him as a person than what we come to see in season 4.
Yeah,
I think that's fair to say.
Because you kind of see why he is the way that he is and why he does the things that he does. And he like, it's hard to like put the following season aside because I think he's such a dick in that one. But like here, you know, you do sympathize with him because, and even in the last season, even though it's not the same actor or anything, like it's obviously the same character, but you know, a lot of the things that were said in the second season are kind of the outcome in this season. Where, I don't know, they're just not nice to him.
No one is. ever nice to him, except for a couple of people which we see in this episode. So the premise of the episode is that Charles is sent away. I think he's at college or something. I don't know. They have a different educational system, but he is away doing a semester in Wales, I believe, learning Welsh because they're having, and I think that comes back to play next season in a really horrific moment, but there are tensions arising, and the crown feels that could be tempered somewhat by having, the prince, the future king, finish his education there.
Mm-hmm.
And we see a great mentorship form with the professor that's there. And, it's really sad to say, but that's like the closest perhaps that, at this point, Charles isn't the worst. At this point, there were roads that could have opened up because of that wonderful friendship he had with the professor. And this is why, like, even in season 4, I still struggle with, like, completely, like, hating him because I've seen what came before, which is what this is and what the previous seasons were. We didn't see them at all. We didn't see him at all for seasons 1 and 2 until, like, one episode where he came out of nowhere and, like, oh, yeah, you exist. All right. And then in that episode, he was basically sent to
boarding
school? Horrible camp. Like, it was a school, but it was a boarding school, and it wasn't the place for him, clearly. And yet he was, again, made against his will to go there. And then here, he's a young adult struggling for a sense of identity and individuality, as all of us have a right to. The problem is, he was born into a family where you don't have the luxury of having those things like everybody else does. And he struggles deeply. And I connect with him here because I would be probably the same way. I would be feeling the exact same way. With all of the things that he's been dealt, like largely absent parents. And it's not as if he makes these, shall we say, it's not as if he makes these concerns or these frustrations or these resentments all that secret. They're pretty aware, as we see throughout the season, especially going forward from here. They're pretty aware of how he feels, and yet they don't care. They don't bother to meet him halfway in the slightest. I don't think anyone, I think Margaret, to an extent, was treated a lot better than Charles because no one even bothers to meet him halfway. Maybe Margaret herself understands Charles more than anybody else, but the point there being is, with Charles is concerned, no one tries to help him. That way he can help them in return for him to understand. There were all these extraordinary, I feel, attempts and concessions to get Philip on board, just last season. And Charles never got any of that. And
nobody vouched for him. Nobody.
No. And what do we have here? Last season, we talked about how Philip's indecent friend that was banished spoke freely to him about how he never liked that Elizabeth treated, as a young child, Charles with a sense of coldness and distance, because it's like looking at her own death in the face. And then, later on in the season, Philip sent him to that boarding school that quite literally broke his spirit. And so what do we have this season? We find him in a happy place, he's doing acting at school. And so they send him to a place, of course, he doesn't want to go, has a miserable time, at least at first, can't really connect with anybody there beside his professor. And yeah, in that episode, with the relationship with the professor, he finds a way to, articulate the frustrations he's been having his whole life, and especially in this moment in his life. And in some ways, he empathizes more so than anyone in the royal family with how the Welsh people are feeling with the struggle that is, and that is with any other region right now, a reoccurring element with the United Kingdom trying to get their independence in a way, to get more power, get more of an individuality. And I loved when Charles, had his speech all in Welsh, and it was hilarious to me how the Welsh people were responding so positively. And, the royal family, Elizabeth and Philip, were there like, oh, that must be a nice speech. Not at all realizing the things that he was saying. That was great. Because at that point, they couldn't stop him, Perhaps, and then this is all leading up to this moment toward the end of this episode. We're really... It kind of crushes me and makes me feel for him the most ever, because while we really gave Philip a lot of shit for the, what he made Charles go through in season 2, it may not have been anywhere near as crippling to the spirit as what Elizabeth said to him at the end of this episode. And quite frankly, I shouldn't have been surprised, but I also was a little bit surprised with how cold and how cruel she was to her firstborn son, with no sense of empathy or understanding whatsoever. It almost just kind of completely shocked me. I shouldn't have been. Because we've had moments where she's had human moments. She's, been emotional and been understanding on various occasions. This is the same person who wanted to forgive, her uncle, the Nazi sympathizer, shall we say, that kept trying to find ways to forgive him. But in this instance, she had no patience. She had no tolerance for her son trying to find an identity of some sort, trying to find a purpose in this world, and her just basically saying, fuck you, you don't get to have one.
Yep. And that's so, I freaking hate that, because it sucks because, it's her son, and I feel, you want the best thing for your son, and you want him to be happy. But her mentality is kind of I sacrifice a lot for the crown, everybody else has to do it as well. But it's also so stupid because she pretty much gets most of the things that she wants. She got Philip, but nobody else gets to have that.
She got Philip, but we didn't see this in the show, but it has been said repeatedly. She got Philip by fighting for him. Both of them fought for each other. She made the families approve. Mm-hmm. So why can't Charles have that? Especially since, bringing Camilla back into the show here, those two have clearly a relationship, and regardless of her class, or regardless of the rumors going on around her, in this moment, in this season, for you to repeatedly ignore the numerous signs, and sometimes obvious and the obvious and blatant signs there were of how much those two cared for one another. And at one point, Charles says to Lord Mountbatten that, I think she's the one. Mm-hmm. And how do they react?
Oh, no.
They react by literally, immediately attempting to sabotage and destroy the relationship altogether. That's how they react. Now, Elizabeth, to her credit, didn't start this shit and wouldn't have done it this way.
Yeah.
Everyone else around her did the hard, heavy lifting here.
But she also didn't stop them.
That's the thing, too. Like, she doesn't get that much credit at the end of the day because she still says, I agree with the decision, which is absurd to agree with the decision because, you're not letting your son have, in some small way, the liberty that you were able to have when you wanted Philip. But it is, honestly, I don't think I ever hated this family more by how quickly and gleefully they were to kill this relationship. And again, it also it continues to get much more absurd because Camilla's family are not Nazis like Philip's family were. Also, Tony was bisexual and had a whole bunch of prostitutes. And again, you see how they coughed at it. But with Charles and Camilla, that just can't happen. And I guess I don't ever understand if they say why, just because she's Camilla, and she's kind of low class because she's okay. Really?
That also makes me question, like, if they were like that with her, how bad did it actually get with Meghan Markle? Like, I can't even imagine, like, what she had to go through.
They go so far as to hook Camilla up
with
with somebody else and announce an engagement. Like, the Queen Mother says gleefully to Elizabeth, everything's been made. All the arrangements have been made. All we need is somebody to tell them. Fuck off. Oh my God, these people. Holy shit. And like, all this happened, like, supposedly the closest person in Charles's life is Uncle Dickie, and it's him that starts this, that instigates this. And like, and you wonder what it, like, I don't know, like, I feel like the royal family,
why
as much
the next person we're going to talk about, why that shit happens.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and also in the next year, in the next season, all the things that are to follow stem from this horrible decision.
Yep.
And as we apply the same thing in the rule of politics, like I just basically, eviscerated the conservatives for this mining disaster, right? Well, I think the same rule applies here. The royals were the one that made this decision to marry Camilla off of somebody else and deny Charles the person he wanted. And so whatever happens with Diana in the next season, as much as it is on Charles, it's on them as well.
Yeah.
Repeatedly. In more ways than just this one choice. Because they make several decisions thereafter that make that situation even more bad. Before we move off Charles, though, it was interesting, though, the relationship that he formed with the Duke of Windsor as he was dying. So this is the last we see of, the Duke of Windsor, King George here, the fallen from grace former king that abdicated and had some communication with Adolf Hitler and everything, as we mentioned in the last season. And here he is, he's dying of the same thing his brother did, which I have to ask, did no one tell these people smoking is bad for your lungs? Or did they just not care?
They don't care. It's the 60s. Okay.
Well, that's true. And this is, but they like lifelong smokers, these people. Derek Jacobi plays the Duke of Windsor here, and he's great. Derek Jacobi think I saw him. He was on a lot of these actors. Obviously, they're British. They were on Doctor Who, but at one point in Doctor Who, he played the Master, which was the arch nemesis of the Doctor, and it was one of the best performances on the show ever, really. And so seeing him back here was a delight, but then also sad because he was dying. You know, he was now an older man.
Yeah.
But what I did find interesting, though, was the bond that he was creating with Prince Charles and a lot of the similarities, because for as much as the Duke of Windsor himself is chastised and put at distance because of the relations, and rightfully so, of, with the Nazis at that point, we can't forget, of course, originally, and, again, putting the royal family on trial here, you also can't help but wonder if any of those things could have been avoided if you just let the guy marry the girl he wanted.
Yep.
If you didn't repeatedly try to destroy relationships.
Cycle, which does get acknowledged in the next season. And it's so bad, and it's like, you guys literally do not learn your lesson.
You keep doing the same thing again and again. And the person who brings that up is Margaret, who she herself was denied the relationship that she wanted. And now look what happened. But yeah, he passes away, and he's buried. I think they finally allow him to come home to be buried. Wallace Simpson is there, and quite shrewdly, also, while she leaves for the last time, warns Charles, be careful with your family. I think Charles says something to the effect of, oh, they just want the best for me. And she's like, no, they don't. They really don't. And then one of the creepiest moments was, I think Charles is about to leave, and he's walking away from them. The rest of them are all kind of, huddled together in this long corridor. And he looks back at them, and then they look to him, and there's just awkward silence. And it's like, this is the first I think the show came closest to portraying the royal family as complete monsters here.
Yeah.
With, I think, good reason, because a lot of the actions that they have taken, like what we've just discussed here, are monstrous. They're just monstrous.
Yeah.
But again, I think what makes the show enjoyable to watch is they're not completely irredeemable. We do have moments with them toward the end here. And now getting to Margaret, right? So we have 2 big episodes with her. One that is maybe the most fun of the entire show and hilarious. And then another one that is perhaps one of the darkest. What a interesting back and forth with her. The first episode we have with Margaret is Margaretology. And this is when she's recruited while she's away. I know, great title.
Yeah. When
she's away in America, Tony has the thing going on, and like a gig, and they're touring California, and, they're making appearances and such. She is recruited because of the closeness and proximity by her sister, the Queen, to visit President Johnson, since he has refused to come over to see them. To visit President Johnson, to schmooze and woo him into getting the UK an economic bailout deal. Because all of the previous attempts to get him to come over, he's not interested. But they sent Margaret there because she's basically the last hope. And Elizabeth was like, please, whatever you do, don't be you. Of course she would say something like that. And of course, Margaret ignores that completely. And this may be one of the best, like, victories and justification for, you know, who Margaret is, that she was able to be herself and single-handedly save the UK from defaulting on their loans, basically.
Yep.
And it's one of the more, I feel, hilarious and entertaining scenes of the entire show. Because the whole thing starts off with they're at dinner. You know, clearly she and the president are, like, not at all into this engagement whatsoever. Like, as if they could be bothered. They're there because they have to be in some way. But she is so shrewd and she's so smart here, where she is able to pick up on how Johnson resents Kennedy and how, like, beloved he is, and you know how overlooked he is. And so, like, when Kennedy is brought up at the dinner table, she mentions how, you know, she met him once and how she was very underwhelmed. And then one person was like, "What did you just say?" And then she doubles down on it. "No, I said what I said." And then Johnson laughs. And then, because you don't want to, you know, the president's laughing, you don't want to be, like, rude. Like, everybody else has to laugh. And that kind of gets things going, you know? And it is interesting, of course, the similarities. In some ways, Margaret was the only person that could have appealed to Johnson because, you know, Johnson was Kennedy's vice president. Johnson was Kennedy's number 2. The other person that is often neglected, if not completely forgotten about, and who no one seems to care about. I wonder who that sounds most like in this show, as we've seen with Margaret being, you know, or was until Charles was born, the number 2, you know, that everyone seemingly forgets about, and no one cares about.
Mm-hmm.
And so it is this very interesting look at a relationship that I never would have thought could have made much sense. You know, this was fun. What did you think?
Yeah, I mean, I love this episode because she kind of was able to give a big fuck you to all of them. Be like, I could do this. You guys just don't care about me, don't believe in me, but look what I just did. But then, you know, the ending just kind of but yeah, you know, you get to see her being her, and her peak moment, if you can say that. And it was just a lot of fun to see her that way.
Her whole thing, again, like what the Duke of Windsor tried doing last season, is I could be doing more.
Mm-hmm.
I could be doing a lot more, but you won't let me. And so, like, Margaret,
she's not so stupid. Like, she's so smart, and she knows what she's doing. Yeah.
But when she approaches Elizabeth and, you know, is about to, like, make this ask, like, I don't know what more she could have done to, you know, I thought that the request was reasonable enough. She wasn't asking. This is probably in terms of the asks that she's made repeatedly to Elizabeth, this perhaps was, like, the smallest of asks.
Mm-hmm.
And even that Elizabeth couldn't give to her.
Yep.
Even that couldn't happen. And again, this is where, you know, we go back and forth with Philip, but Philip is kind of the one that really nudges Elizabeth in the other direction. Like, well, you really can't do that because she's not you. You're you. And so that's the thanks she gets, you know, for saving the country.
Yep.
Yeah, there were many moments where Margaret should have understood she would be happier if she left, which is a reoccurring theme we'll be picking up with her as we go on.
Yeah.
because with the finale, because she kind of gets the finale almost to herself with season 3. Criticore, in that is the relationship is basically all but done with her and Tony. Tony's gone away. Tony's openly seeing somebody else, a younger woman. And of course, Margaret is spiraling. Not just because of that, but because yet again her family not only is not understanding, not only do they not care, but you almost get the impression that they kind of are taunting her because of it. Yeah. Not Elizabeth. She's the only one that seems to like pick up on how this is a pretty serious moment for Margaret. But everybody else, again, like you think at this point we'd run out of things to say, or we'd run out of examples for how shitty the royal family can be. But like everybody knows Tony is out with somebody else at Margaret's birthday party. And if they didn't know, Margaret literally says, oh yeah, he's with his girlfriend. And then what do? They proceed to talk about how much they like Tony.
Yeah.
And like...
That's so...
What do you say to that? This is... And Philip, the mom, joins in. Like, they're all like just complimenting Tony. He's currently committing adultery in their marriage, and they're talking him up in front of her daughter.
If she does it, oh no.
That's what was so frustrating is, okay, she did, because he was. Later on in the episode, she forms another relationship. But when that's discovered, her mom calls her a whore. She was cheated on repeatedly by her husband. You call him, I like him. It's a photograph, I believe, of Margaret being basically like Roddy, or whatever his name was putting lotion on her. And she gets called a whore. Like the abuse, the straight up abuse that Margaret gets by her own family. I'm sorry. It's at this point, it is fucking disgusting. It is fucking disgusting. Like Margaret at this point should understand she has no place in this family. She is not regarded at all in this family. They may say, but they really don't act that way at all. I mean, how little do you have to care about someone when you talk about, in the kindest of terms, to their cheating husband, about their cheating husband in front of her?
That's so annoying, and you just want to yell at them.
I want to scream. Because, like, you don't do that.
No.
Who does that?
Yeah.
Like, imagine if your mom, Alexis, was just out of nowhere just, like, saying, oh, how great your ex was. Why are you talking about my ex? And why are you saying he's great in front of me? Hello? It is... Oh, God. And then, of course... But it's just the double standard that really gets me. It's like, you know...
Yeah. No,
like,
yeah, that's... I mean, yeah, like, obviously, it pisses me off that they're doing this to her, but it also pisses me off because this is just normal behavior. You know, the guy gets to get away with it.
And it gets even more enraging when, in that last scene with Tony and with Margaret, in the highest form of hypocrisy maybe ever, he is offended that she is seeing somebody else after he was in a relationship with a younger woman. You don't get to be angry about that. You have no right to be angry about that. You're the reason this happened in the first place. But how fucking wonderful it is of you to have the luxury of being more angry than she is and then divorcing her.
Again, this happens more often than we know.
Yeah. But then, of course, as I mentioned at the top of the episode, there is a suicide attempt. Although, I don't know if it is a suicide attempt. I mean, she does overdose on whatever she is taking on medication. But there is a sequence later on with her and Elizabeth where, well, I think it was, but how serious it was. I mean, it was a failed suicide attempt, and then she seemed like she very immediately regretted doing it, if it was in fact a real suicide attempt at that point. So
I mean, regardless if it was or what, I think subconsciously it was. But then, I mean, she kind of came into her senses. Was like, well, this is stupid. But even if it was if she sees it as a mistake, I wouldn't blame her.
Yeah.
And she's gone through some shit, and that was the lowest she's ever been, and with good reason. And it just, yeah. I remember watching that episode and I was crying because, you kind of watched everything that happened to her, and you feel her pain, and you understand and sympathize. And it sucks when when you say that, when you say, yeah, I understand why this person thought that this was a good idea at the time.
And maybe my favorite scene of the show, Elizabeth comes to visit her, and they share a really beautiful, touching, emotional scene in where I don't think the two have ever been more emotive ever anywhere else than in this moment. And this is a reminder to me that as cold and cruel as she was with Charles, there is a real person in there somewhere. There is a real human being. And when she says to her sister, for a while there, I got a little bit of a glimpse of what life would be like without you. And that would be unbearable. There is no one closer to me than you. Yeah. Basically what she says. And her crying, actually crying. And then that's what you can tell that that's genuine, real emotion there.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. That was great. I don't know what else to say. I mean, it's a great moment for Elizabeth as well, because as the episode shows, she was the only one that cares at the very least. And even though at the very least, she's the queen. I would have said to her, Your Majesty, could you tell your mom and husband to shut the fuck up and not mention Tony? I mean, you have that authority, right? That is your authority as sovereign to tell them what to do. Shut them the fuck up, Yeah.
It just, that frustrates me too. She doesn't stay quiet when it's not necessary, but then doesn't say anything when it is necessary.
Yeah. Again, no one's perfect. And in every person's life, there are a laundry list of mishandled moments. And because of who she is, perhaps it just doesn't occur to her to do so. But at the very least, we see her care and see her try. Even if she repeatedly falls short, she at least makes the effort.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes that's all we can do. the season ends with a pretty interesting moment with, the score coming up and the queen celebrating her silver jubilee. And we don't see much of it but the beginning. But that's kind of it.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where we are. Alexis, anything else to say about this season? Maybe something that we've missed that you wanted to say, and then also just like your final thoughts, about where season 3 lands.
No, I think we pretty much covered everything. This is a great season. So much shit happened, and like interesting stuff. Like how I said in the beginning, like real life stuff that we could actually relate to.
Right.
But yeah, it's a good season. Really good.
As I mentioned at the top of the show, in many ways, the season is my favorite. I think it has some standout, some of the best episodes of the whole show, but also just a wonderful way that it, shows us these characters in some intimate moments that gives us perhaps the closest glimpse of who they really are in the struggle of being a royal. I mean, it's hard to put it in a struggle because, you're living in the lap of luxury, as we should, continue to say. But, having everything. The part of this show, as us, as regular people watching the show, is just constantly being reminded about what would you rather have? Have
Mm-hmm.
everything except individuality, or have nothing and keep your individuality?
Mm-hmm.
And
Which
for as yeah.
we will get into that next season too, people.
Yeah, if you thought the carnage was enough, just wait till next year.
People, acknowledging that this is not the life that they would have chosen, and this is not the life that they want, but they also can't leave it. So interesting stuff.
Yes, it is. Well, this about wraps it up for today. I want to thank you all for listening to our podcast. We have one more to go. I can't believe we're almost about to be done with this. We have one more episode to go with season 4 of The Crown. And then as far as other programming you can listen to here on Red Spotlight, again, anywhere you listen to podcasts, whether it be on Apple or Spotify, CastBox, or YouTube, we have weekly recaps of WandaVision, currently streaming on Disney Plus with David Francisco. And then weekly episodes with Peter Martinez. Of course, Alexis is a part of the Fantasy Fair podcast, which you can definitely catch on our feeds anywhere you listen to podcasts. And I do believe, Alexis, have you formally announced the plans that you guys have for February yet?
I don't think so.
Is that like a done deal, or do you want to go ahead and can you talk about that now?
So we're talking about shorts all next month.
What kind of shorts? Khaki shorts?
Film shorts.
Film shorts. Short films.
Hopefully we get to tackle all of them. They just added a bunch more, so we'll see. But I'm really excited because there's a lot that I haven't seen.
So short films, particularly the ones on Disney Plus, and then, right? That's the one, and then others?
Yeah, so it's the ones that are on Disney Plus, the Spark shorts, and then the Walt Disney ones. I forgot what those are called. We're doing, what is it called? The Inside Pixar, which is where they talk about the cast members for Pixar. And then the shorts that play before the movies, which are not in those categories, but yeah. And then hopefully we'll have time to do the new ones that just were released, popcorn shorts. I think that's what they're called.
Right.
So yeah, I'm excited.
Can't wait. Can't wait to hear all that wonderful stuff. Well, Thank you for being here, Alexis. Thank you all for listening. Reminder, you can catch our show every single Sunday, sometimes on Thursdays, and maybe on Monday or Tuesday, depending on how many episodes. We're doing a lot of podcasts in recent days, so keep an eye out for that. And until next time, stay in the spotlight. Bye-bye.